This is you, and you're stuck in a steel coffin about 400 feet under the water in something the size of 3 school buses duct taped together. These submarines were filled with fumes, body odor, throw up, and 70 other sweaty men who haven't seen sunlight in weeks. Oh, and if you step outside of this school bus, you may or may not die from the pressure of the ocean water. But hey, if you somehow survive that, you can probably see some pretty cool animals. That is, if you can see at all in the pitch black. You wanted to join the Navy because you wanted adventure. Instead, you got claustrophobia. You thought the Navy was glamorous, clean uniforms, tropical ports, waving at girls on the dock, and instead, you're living like a moldy sardine in the ocean's most depressing tin can. You're not even on a real boat. You're on what they call a submarine, but it's more like a floating coffin. And the worst part, you volunteered for this. It didn't start this way, of course. You were just a kid once, from a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight. You'd sit on your porch and stare at the stars, dreaming of becoming a baseball player, a doctor, and maybe even having girls who might actually talk to you. Instead, you got sent to one of the most dangerous places you could ever be in human history. And let me tell you, there's definitely no girls here. About 22% of all American submariners died during World War II, the highest casualty rate of any US military branch. Roughly 3,500 men were killed out of around 16,000 who served, and the US Navy lost 52 submarines during the war. But let's say you're not from the United States. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't much better. 75% of German U-boat sailors died, over 28,000 out of 39,000 crewmen. A U-boat is a fancy name for a German sub. Only about 1 in 4 German submarine crewmen survived the war. And in 1943, German U-boats were being sunk faster than they could be built, often within weeks of launching. I mean, these things were basically steel death traps that somehow were allowed to go underwater. If the hull cracked or you took on water below depth, no one survived. Escape hatches were basically useless at a certain depth. Enemy destroyers also dropped depth charges that could collapse a submarine hull with one hit. A depth charge was a barrel-shaped explosive filled with high explosive like TNT. It was dropped from surface ships, usually destroyers or aircrafts, into the ocean to detonate at a specific depth in the ocean, targeting submarines hiding below the surface. And as if it couldn't get any worse, machinery failures, CO2 poisoning, fuel leaks, and even cooking fires could kill a whole crew. Plus, many submariners suffered from claustrophobia, hallucinations, and mental breakdowns from the stress of stealth and silent warfare. A single mistake in depth calculations or sonar readings could get everyone killed. The most used American subs were the Gato class. They were the first commissioned in 1941. These had 10 torpedo tubes, 6 in the front and 4 in the rear, deck guns, and anti-aircraft guns. The second most common sub was the Baleo class, which were an upgraded version of the Gato class. These had a stronger pressure hull and could dive deeper, about 400 feet or more. They also carried the same torpedoes and guns, but had improved durability. So here you are, crammed in a metal tube 400 feet under the surface, moving at a speed just slightly faster than a drunk sea turtle. You sleep in a hot bunk, which means you share your bed with another guy and rotate like a motel mattress. The smell is indescribable, a mix of diesel, body stench, athlete's foot, and something vaguely metallic. Privacy doesn't exist here. You shit next to people eating. You eat next to people who haven't shit in 3 days. It's all in the same room. And no, you don't flush. Not right away. There's a poop schedule, so the tank doesn't explode. Yes, I am being serious. I honestly wish I wasn't. Submarines stank so bad they could have qualified as biological weapons. With 70 to 90 men crammed into a steel tube for weeks with no showers, no fresh air, and 1 working toilet. The stench was a mix of diesel, body odor, feet, cigarette smoke, rotting food, mildew, and despair. Even new crew members passed out from the smell just a few seconds after they walked into the sub. Oh, and I probably should mention there was also a rat problem. Yes, rats and cockroaches lived on submarines. And no, they didn't grab snorkel gear and swim 400 feet down. Instead, they crawled through food stores that were brought onto the sub, and they were known for chewing through the wiring. You couldn't escape pests, even underwater. If you saw the rats suddenly scatter, it meant bad news. They could sense changes in pressure and were a warning sign for depth charges. The food? Technically it's food. Dried eggs, powdered milk, canned meats labeled mystery, and the occasional potato if it hasn't sprouted a beard. The first few days out of port, the cooks might whip up something halfway edible, but after that, it's preserved sadness, boiled depression, and whatever didn't go bad first. If you're lucky, someone smuggled aboard ketchup to remove the taste of the food that had already gone bad. If not, you just eat in silence and pretend the beans weren't reheated 3 times. You pass the time by reading the same 3 books over and over, writing letters you'll never send, and playing cards with men who may or may not lose their minds by next week. There's always one guy humming too loud, another who talks to himself, and someone's always naked, for no reason at all. But forget that. Let's talk about fear, real fear. Because when your sonar pings, that high-pitched ping that means someone out there is looking for you, your blood turns cold. You go silent. The whole boat holds its breath. If a destroyer finds you, you don't get a fight. You get depth charged. Boom, boom, boom. And you wonder in those long seconds of chaos if you'll die from the explosion or from the ocean crushing you like a soda can. And if you do surface, if you're lucky enough to get above water before the batteries die or the air gets too foul to breathe, you're still in enemy waters, and your submarine is about as armored as a cereal box. Planes can spot you. Torpedoes can find you. The ocean wants you dead, and so does everyone else. You're not some grand hero on a mighty battleship. You're a ghost with a death wish, sneaking around in the dark and hoping your own torpedoes don't circle back on you. Which they sometimes do, because guess what? In World War II, torpedo guidance systems were about as reliable as a coin toss. Many didn't detonate, others looped back. You could launch a shot at a German ship and end up sinking yourself. That's a hell of a way to go. Talk about friendly fire. And oh, let's not forget hygiene, or the lack of it. You're covered in sweat, oil, and engine grease most days. You get 1 shower every week or 2, assuming the water isn't needed for something more important like engine cooling or coffee. Your clothes cling to you like wet rags. Your skin breaks out in rashes. Everyone stinks. Everyone knows it. No one says anything because what's the point? If you get hurt, there's a guy with a book. Not a doctor, a guy with a book. Maybe a few syringes of morphine and some bandages. Surgery? Forget about it. The operating table is a dinner table with a towel on it. If something needs cutting out, you'd better pray it's small or that you'll die quick. Because nobody wants to be awake while the doctor saws your leg off with a bread knife and a bottle of whiskey. The submarine sailors who did come back came back with haunted eyes, and most of them didn't even come back at all. Almost 3,500 American submariners died in World War II, more than 20% of the total force. 1 in 5 never surfaced again. No dog tags, no grave, just pressure, darkness, and a name on a memorial. But the silent killer of being a submarine sailor in World War II was farting. Yes, farting could actually get you killed. Silent running meant no talking, no metal-on-metal noise, and no bodily noises. Loud stomach gurgles and farts could echo off the hull and get picked up on an enemy's sonar. One sailor's loud sneeze once almost got the whole crew killed. That is definitely not the way I would want to go out.